good at mandating things without any thought of how it's gonna be funded. It's like, nope, this is a good idea, and this is what we're proposing, but,
Right, it hasn't gone through appropriations yet.
and they get it out there, and then you're trying to figure it out. So,
All right, it is 5:03, call the meeting to order. Flags over here. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time, I would invite any member of the public if they would like to speak. Okay, thank you. All right, we have a review of first readings for the following policies. I did not realize that there was a JLCE-R procedures, so I apologize for that. There's going to be a D there as well. In our current policy from 94.3, it's a singleton, and they have obviously flushed that out to the procedures page. So the first policy for review and adoption, we have no current policy for relation with booster groups, and so that would be coded JJIBC relations with booster groups. Obviously we have a very strong relationship with our boosters, and we just felt like, given the amount of support that they do provide the buildings, the different programs and clubs in our schools, I personally had a very good relationship with my middle school group when I was principal there. I know that the boosters here at the high school, especially the athletic, I shouldn't say at the high school, but the boosters that support the high school during concessions and things like that, get very instrumental and integral to them. And obviously we just feel like especially when you start talking money and accepting, whether it's donations, whether it's activities for the kids, we really ought to protect ourselves and make sure that we do have a policy that speaks to the different booster groups and their responsibilities and our responsibilities. So I won't take the time to go through every single bulleted item here. I just want to hit a couple of the highlights and then obviously open it up to any questions or certainly any concerns. The first thing I would highlight here is the letter B on the first page. The group must provide details of the structure, organization, including its purpose and goals, intended use of funds generated, and the name of its officers and its bylaws. That is, I think for most groups, that's pretty common now to have the bylaws and to have the names of the officers. So obviously, I think that's important to note that the policy does that, and most of our groups, I believe, are following that. Letter C, the booster president or designee, right? It could be a different name than president. Must make application of the superintendent to the superintendent, or the building principal. We're going to have the or in there because when we start talking about letter C and letter F, those usually come through the through the building use forms. So a lot of times we rely on the building principals to say whether or not their building is available for use. Zach, is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's very fair.
Okay. I would include the or building principal in both of those, paragraph C and paragraph F. Very similar to F, we jump down to F, all fundraising activities must be approved in advance and that is done through the building use form. Right there, they're using our space, and they are then saying what it's for, and so that both C and F get accomplished through the building use form. Just backing up to E, I think this is important, and this is something that we are moving away from. No monies collected by the booster group will be deposited directly to student athletic activity accounts. And that was the big thing, honestly, in adopting the policy is rather than that money going right into our activity funds, that should be set up with their own bank accounts and making sure that we're not reliant upon them counting money home, then bringing it to us. We're giving a receipt for that money. Like, that practice needs to stop. And so again, I wanted this policy. Again, I'm not saying there's any anything nefarious going on. It's just a matter of liability and the school district doing what it needs to do and the boosters doing what they have a goal to do. Obviously, no funding during school hours. Remember, that's school hours, non-athletic events or other types of activities. So, there's a very specific time frame for that. And then J, another reason why I like this, the school obviously has tax exemption for a variety of the products that it purchases. The boosters are not lawfully able to use the school's tax exemption status. So from an auditing standpoint, this is a very important one that we like that's in this policy. K, this is interesting. It's good. It will have to be monitored. Booster group gifts should enhance activities for both boys and girls. Not an issue there, obviously. I think that's stated in their vision and mission. The principals usually have that in mind, right? We are looking for enrichment. We're looking to enhance. The board will consider gender equity and budget implications before accepting booster group donations. So I don't necessarily know how the board is going to monitor whether or not there has been gender equity in its acceptance of funds. I don't necessarily know what mechanism could be used for that, but I think it's important to keep in mind, especially, the board would not want to put itself in a position where it's always accepting funds on behalf of girls softball and then never accepting funds for anything. You know what I mean? Like I don't know what the mechanism is for this, but I think it's important to highlight that there is consideration that this is being equally distributed. And obviously, the Title IX regulations, that's pretty important. Lastly, just want to highlight one more. And not that this doesn't happen in Hermon that I'm aware of, but if boosters plan to provide or recognize a student or a team, that does need to be run through the school committee.
Well, my only question there would be scholarships that they award at graduation. Because that is an individual award, I would think.
Yep, and I think that should be run through the school committee prior to that happening.
So run through that they're planning on recognizing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Should it be the school committee or should it be like all other scholarships? Don't they have a scholarship committee? Or it's guidance, someone in guidance?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of the scholarships that are passed out they're through private organizations, nonprofits, right? But when you have a booster group that is consistently feeding the school enrichment activities and helping the school out, I think it is important that if they are going to select a student to give a scholarship to, I think it should come to the school committee and that should be approved. Okay. I just think that type of individual recognition is, I think it's important to do that. That would be that's how I interpret it. You would certainly look for a legal opinion on that if scholarship is different than a recognition or award.
Are there any other scholarships that are, I don't want to say intertwined with the school, so to speak, or are they all separate entities?
I would have to look
Yeah.
at the list. Most of them are separate nonprofit entities
Yeah.
that are not directly or they're not remember, they are fundraising on your grounds. They are making their money and enriching the students, but they're doing it on your premise, on your facilities, at your permission. So before they turn around and recognize an individual student with a scholarship like Hermon Athletics Boosters, that should be approved through you because it's technically, it is your money and you've allowed it to be raised.
But is it the school's money? They have been allowed to raise it
They've been allowed to raise it,
on premise.
correct,
Okay.
with your permission.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And most of these other scholarships, the Methodist Church Scholarship, the Hermon Rotary Club, I don't even know if we have a Rotary Club, but
Yeah,
the
we
Hermon,
Oh, not Hermon, not Hermon, not Hermon, thanks.
the Masons, right? Whoever it might be that's granting, they're not connected to you in any way, shape, or form, right? They have their own,
Gotcha.
organization. They've not used your facilities to raise their money. So I just think it's,
It may be worth, so I can see rewriting this a little bit where it's either approved through the school scholarship committee or the school board.
That's what I was
There you
thinking,
go.
the
Yeah.
schools. Is there a scholarship? That's what
They
I
have a
was thinking.
scholarship.
yes.
Yeah.
So we could have it through there.
Yeah. And you want
To
me
be
to do it,
consistent.
you want me to do it more
Yeah.
there, just in case we're.
And I would write it that they don't have to approve it as much as they need to be made aware of it. Because
Acknowledge it.
acknowledge, yeah,
Acknowledge it.
it needs to be acknowledged at the school scholarship level.
I really like letter I. That the money needs to be kept separate.
Yes.
I'm working with the Hermon Middle School Parent Advisory Council. It is very nice to have it separate for many, many reasons.
Many
One,
reasons, yes.
it makes it, from my point of view, it takes the liability away from the school. But as a school, we also have very stringent expectations on how we utilize school funds, which we should, and how we can expend it. And for instance, the middle school parent advisory council provides $25 gift cards to students that get student month. We cannot do that through the school funds, and by having their support, it really enhances it many, 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 many ways around.
Yeah, I like it. Just obviously a place and committee everywhere it says board.
And you have things like the advisory council, parent advisory council they can offer a Sunday at 2:15 or at the end of the day during lunch. You can't use that money to buy unapproved or not guideline approved food, right? So, but they have the luxury of doing that. It has to follow. It can't compete with you. You have competitive food service policy, but it's just nice. They just can do some things that the school can't. They've been a great asset that way. So, any other overall questions about policy?
Can I just ask on B and
B.
B? Does it need to be noted in there that about the information being updated yearly or anything like that when you put it in policy? I mean, granted, because positions change, that type of thing, it may not need to be noted in here, but, because, I mean, we've all been on committees and sometimes the names, the officers change, so I don't know if that's where there's gonna be a policy, if that's something that needed to be clarified.
Yeah, it could be the group must provide details of the organizational structure, because in their bylaws, when an 8th grade parent comes to the high school and says, I'm passing the torch on the treasurer role,
Right.
well, that's gotta be updated in the bylaws too. So we could say something like annually.
Mhm. Just a
The
question.
group must provide the annual detail of the structure, including, just for the sake of having an up-to-date structure. And I can throw in the word annual. That makes sense. Okay.
I do have a question. I know.
Yes, sir.
So I looked at the very end. It says this policy is being coded JJIDC for the purpose of keeping athletic policies together. An alternative code is KJA, which is under the school and connection with the outside agencies.
Mhm.
Given that we're making the connection with both the elementary and middle school, which don't have the connection necessarily to athletics, would it make sense to code it under the KJA, which is under that school relationship with the community?
It certainly would make sense. We have many boosters that aren't just high school athletics. Yep. You all in favor of doing that, KJA coding? KJA. Make sure everybody gets that. Okay. All right. Assignment of students to classes, 5-year-olds. So I just was scanning through some policies that are quite out of date. I think we moved out of all the 70s, and I didn't see anything in the 80s for whatever reason. And then I was stumbling into the 90s. So here are some 90s policies. I'm actually kind of glad I stumbled onto the first 8 one. But this one was, I think it's a 93 or 94 policy. 94. You have very few changes in JGAA. I would say the first change, though, is the coding. They have a code JGAA. You currently have a code of JEDCA. I think anytime you get the chance to recode, and especially if it's 4 letters versus 5. So that would be the first change. The second change in this policy versus our current policy, they have deleted one sentence in the second paragraph, and it's the acceleration. They've deleted some wording around acceleration. That's really not a term that I don't use that term anymore, acceleration. No. It's an old educational term that's going by the wayside. And what they've done here is basically what they're saying is when you have a 5-year-old come in and a parent requests them to go to first grade, that's what this policy deals with. And these are the things to consider by the building principal and then the superintendent. So we have socio-emotional maturity, that's in the old policy. We have the decision lies with and then appealable to the superintendent, that's in the old policy. We have the right to reserve school testing, that's in the old policy. We have any such placement is conditioned upon demonstrated success, that's in the old policy. And F, all exceptional placements are to be reported, that's also. The new policy, and I think it's a very smart thing to put in here, we have a letter E, which is not in the old policy. A student who is enrolled in a public kindergarten in another state and was promoted to first grade may enroll in first grade. So if you run into a transitioning student who has already completed kindergarten, I don't know what state that would be, but they did, and they were successfully promoted to first grade, you would not keep them in kindergarten if the parent requested it just because they were 5. So I think that's a smart thing. We have a lot of people that move, and it would be good to recognize a parent's desire if they've already done a kindergarten program successfully. That doesn't mean the principal and the parent could not discuss them doing kindergarten again. It just says that we would consider past success. So that is J, G, soon to be AA. Any questions about that? We also do not have JFAA on cross-reference, so I would strike that. That would be struck. We do have I, and we do have JFAB, but we don't have JFAA. Deb, you good with that?
Okay.
So I believe then, I just have to check this. I don't know if we rescind JEDCA, or I think we just amend it, right? We're not rescinding it, we're just gonna change all of the language, so we'll just change the tag, add in a couple of sentences. Okay. So that will come back, JEDCA will come back with all those edits. First aid and emergency medical care. So again, we have 93 policy. You can tell, if you look at our 2 policies, you can see at that time in 93, there was no procedures policy. So we have JLCE, we have the opening statement, if you will, the 4 paragraphs. We then have page 2, 3, and 4, our old policy, where we then list out the procedures. That changes in this policy. We go to a JLC and a JLCE, and then a procedures JLCE-R, which is very common, obviously, when you have a procedures policy following a normal policy. So let's look at the first one first, JLCE, first aid and emergency care. You can see that there's a couple of significant changes there. The first is that the Hermon School Department is responsible for delivering first aid or emergency treatment in case of sudden illness or injury to a student or staff member. You can see here that we just identify what first aid is. It's immediate temporary care, and we use the main school health manual, so it changes our reference point. And then it becomes the superintendent and or designee to establish and implement procedures for handling said accidents, injuries, and whose responsibilities they are to the, obviously, the various school personnel. What we have here, we get into transportation, which is inappropriate. We get into informing parents, which in the that's a procedural thing. That's not in the definition of what first aid and emergency care is, whose responsibility is. So I think it's important to note, I'll just highlight in this second paragraph, we do use the recommendations in Maine Schools Health Manual. So it could be anything from communicable diseases to CPR, AED, to stop the bleed training, to concussion management. I mean, all of that. We use their manual, right? That guides us in our, whether it's our emergency response folder, or if it's the way we structure teams, or the policies around concussions, or the protocols around concussions, or the trainings that we have our staff do on bloodborne pathogens, or on stop the bleed, or on first aid. So that does inform everything that we do. So this is very appropriate. This is now listed. In addition, we also report, the superintendent shall maintain a system for reporting accidents. And so we do keep, obviously, very meticulous records. We have forms for reporting accidents. We have forms to OSHA and for employee accidents. We have forms for special education accidents. We've got forms for every type of accident I feel like you could encounter. And so we obviously take all those things very seriously. And then we, as you know, whether it's through procedure and protocol, or whether it's through the emergency manual, we have designees for a variety of types of responses to whatever medical emergency might happen to arise. Because we are obviously very familiar with students getting hurt, injured, etc. on the school campus. So this is just short, concise. We do these things, we reference this place, or this manual, and we do provide appropriate training for such individuals. Sorry, that was a little long-winded for only one paragraph.
So what are you gonna do? You're gonna strike out the current one and just replace this?
Yep.
Yeah.
So ours is not even, like we're doing this. We're doing page 1. We're not doing.
And we'll say in the 1990s they were a little more verbose than they were in the 1970s.
Yeah,
Right. Definitely.
I really, when I was reading this, I got to the private vehicle thing, and I'm just like, oh my
I know.
gosh, like, can you imagine transporting a student in your private vehicle out from an emergency? Like, oh.
I couldn't imagine a single emergency that would constitute.
Now, I've ridden in an ambulance with a student who's having an emergency,
Oh,
and
yeah.
parents couldn't get there, but that's a little bit different of a situation. So, anyways. Then transitioning to our procedure, again, nice one-page, very, very sequential, very non-verbose. We have emergency cards. We do not keep emergency cards anymore. We have PowerSchool, so all of our data is uploaded, and this is how we obviously keep all of our contact information. So that's something that's really not appropriate anymore for policy. Then it gets into a lot of, again, just treatment given. It gives you numbers, chronological order. It gives you how information should be transmitted. All of those things always change, right? So we need a policy that allows us to respond in a way that's best practice. So a couple of things in the procedural policy for first aid. The important thing is right off the bat, the building principal or designee shall be notified immediately of an injury or student in the school building or on school premises. And I know that that's a practice that occurs in all of our buildings. The principals are made known, And then the next thing that happens is after the incident has been, and sometimes it's even during. I've received several phone calls from all of our building principals about there's an ambulance on its way, right? They just let you know. It's coming, just want to give you a heads up. And if there's anything I can help with, it usually is in good hands, but they are very good about that. Then the report is given to the superintendent, and we obviously do what we need to do from a legality and a liability end on when we get reports of injury. We follow the appropriate protocols at the central office. This one It's an interesting sentence. If the student is to be sent home, the principal designee shall first determine if the parent or guardian is at home to receive the student. This does not normally happen, right? This is a paragraph, a sentence, excuse me, that, you know, Zach's not calling a fifth grade parent saying, your child got hurt here, we're gonna send him home, are you home? You know what I mean? But what might happen is if there was an injury that was serious enough and the student was gonna ride the bus home, Zach might contact that parent and say, hey, so-and-so got injured, or the nurse is contacting that student. And then we're having a conversation with the parent and the guardian saying, how do you wanna play the next hour and a half? Are they gonna stay in school? Are you gonna come get them? Our nurse makes recommendations on whether or not, you know, she doesn't tell them to, but I recommend you go have an x-ray done. I recommend that you come to school and.
I can remember a situation even in the last 2 school weeks where it was 15 minutes before the bell, and we recommended to the parent that the student be picked up, and they said no, hop on the bus.
Yeah.
So I do see that this could be possible.
Yeah, and I think it is important to note that the parent does have the right to make that decision. Unless obviously, if we feel it's to the degree that it's not appropriate, we're calling emergency responders, first responders, and saying, we need the ambulance is coming, and we are taking your child to said medical institution.
So what are you gonna change that to say? If the student is seen by the nurse,
Nope.
parents will be contacted?
Nope.
What are you gonna do?
I'm just gonna leave it the same. I just wanna know, the way you first read it, if the student is to be sent home, the principal first determines if the parent or guardian is home to receive the student. So basically what I'm saying is that if we have a question, the nurse and or the principal are reaching out to check with the parent to make sure that this student can be received by someone, right? Because we should, and again, it's just good practice, right? We wanna make sure that parents shouldn't know about an injury at school. Obviously, if it's been reported to the principal, they shouldn't know about that when the child gets home from the child, right? And that's why having a third nurse, a nurse in every building, it's been such a breath of fresh air. It helps you button up a lot of these holes. It doesn't fall on Zach, who's trying to maybe do some discipline or do an observation, right? You have that direct contact, that expertise with home to medical professional at school, and it's been awesome. A student should not be sent home unless some responsible person in the household is there to receive him. And again, if in the case the student is not able to go home unassisted, the principal shall require the parent to call for the child, or shall provide proper supervision, seeing the child is escorted home safely.
So I can, in another situation, I don't know if this happened in Hermon Middle School, but we had a situation where a student could have gone on the bus, but we didn't feel safe with them at home by themselves.
Yeah.
And that happens more mental health side of it, but it happens quite a bit actually, and that paragraph is vital.
And again, this just allows us to flex if we feel like a student is not going to be safe at home unsupervised. And this allows us that ability. And I do think that's important, more for the emotional health than it is for the actual physical injury, because again, we don't have any issue calling 911. It's okay, we need to call 911. It's not a big deal. It's not the scarlet letter to have the ambulance at your school driveway. It's not a big deal. Like, they're professionals. We need them. No big deal. And in the case of serious injury requiring immediate attention of a physician, the following procedure. The school nurse and the school physician. So we contract with the school physician. That is not our call. We do not call a school physician. So I would recommend, and I'm just checking one thing on the language here, I would recommend that if it's in the case of serious injury requiring immediate attention of a physician, the following procedure. The school nurse shall call the family, because it's not going to be the school physician, and I don't see us having a physician, so I do think we should. I don't see that happening.
I think we should start it too.
Right, and because then we go into B, if the school physician is not available, because we don't have one, the family shall be contacted and the student sent to the family physician on the instruction of the parent. So I think B should be struck, and C, frankly, C should be struck as well as a predicate, or as a follow-up. if the family physician is not available, any other physician shall be called, the student shall be taken to the nearest hospital. That's what we do. If there's an emergency requiring doctor care, we take them to the hospital and we inform the parent. That's what we do. Now, we do try to follow, obviously, preference to hospitals. And, you want to go to here versus we want to go here. Totally get it. And if a parent says, I'm coming, we'll meet you there. Right? Again, we are accommodating, but we are going to get the kid to the hospital if they require a doctor. Like, that's just.
So you don't ever call the family physician?
Nope.
Okay, yeah, yep,
So
so that's good.
that's just a B we don't need because I just don't see that happening. And if you, 10 years down the road, the school has a physician on site, that can be revisited at a later date. And then obviously, we would just edit D accordingly. The parent shall be responsible for any fees in connection with. That's obviously falls on the family, not on the school.
Would it make sense to have written in here, the school's priority is to get the student to the nearest hospital, however, the family may decide to choose a different physician? Because I could see them saying, I'd rather take my kid to the urgent care for the broken arm, because then they do that with the x-rays, or I'd rather pick them up rather than have them ride the ambulance. I could see them saying, I'd rather have a different path, but that's not the path the school would take. The path the school would take would be the hospital.
Yeah, it says the nearest hospital.
Yep.
And I think that's,
We
again,
all fill it out on the form, I guess.
yeah, we do. Yeah. But again, in an emergency situation, especially one that's going to need immediate,
Bleed, major seizure, massive concussion, etc.
Yeah, and there might not be the opportunity, right? It could be at the elementary school baseball field, and nobody's there to access. Rick doesn't have immediate access to Power School from a hospital preference standpoint. Okay, well, we're going to Northern Light because it's the closest, whatever it might be. So yeah, I just think it just needs to say nearest, and then that's what we're gonna do. So yeah. So just a small edit to JLCR -R, first aid and administrative procedure.
Perfect, I like it.
And those are your policies.
So for the next one, you're going to bring forth the ones about, Jody gave you some about hiring from one of our special meetings. I'll have to look at which ones it was.
Needs to be reviewed.
Yeah, the one, I'll get them to you, yeah. One that's really urgent that I feel that we need to get on right away is BCA, School Committee Member Code of Conduct. I'd like to have that copy reviewed by MSMA, and I would like to get an opinion on when there's direct violations of that code of conduct. I really think it's very timely that we get that looked at ASAP.
So do you want that to come to policy?
I want that to come to policy. I'm gonna bring it up at the committee meeting on Monday. I'll be prepared for that, but I really want, like I mentioned, the opinion from the MSMA. And I want to take it a step further to look at when there's violations of that, how we handle it.
Okay.
So it's BCA.
Okay, so in that same vein, I am not gonna, I know we traditionally have these meetings on the Tuesday before our Monday meeting. I will not be here the 4 days of the 28th, 29th, 30th, and 31st that week. So we would need to either, we'd have to go the week before.
It's critical that we have one in May, so let's,
So you wanna
let's.
go the Tuesday before that, so May, you mind pulling the calendar up?
Yeah,
May
no, I
21st.
wouldn't be able to do, that one, of course, it could happen without me, and that's fine. What about the 23rd,
What day is that?
a Thursday?
That's fine.
Okay, let's do the 23rd, yeah, because I really want to be able to get ironed out those ones
No problem.
that Jody had.
May 23rd.
May 23rd. And it's
And that'll be plenty of time to notify everybody.
It's
of the
five,
change.
it's 5 o'clock still.
Yeah, let's do it.
Still good. 5 p.m. on the 23rd, and I'll put that in my board report.
Like I said, I'll bring it up Monday as well, but
May 23rd, 5 p.m. Okay. Great.
Thank you.
All right.
perfect, thank you, Micah.
You're welcome. Thank you.
See you Monday. I don't know what that was. phone buzzed for some reason. I felt it vibrate and I thought it was
I
yours.
thought it was mine too, but I was looking down.